Alright guys, what's up, Let me adjust this mic. Another driving episode. Driving through LA. So today I wanted to talk about something supernatural. You guys seem to like the topics. I like recording about them, so let's go. Actually, I'm going the wrong direction. Well, anyways. So I wanted to talk about potential demon possession, what people think about it. I want to talk about that, about the ideas around demons, demon possession, ideas around whether demons exist, what it looks like. The thing that's kind of putting this to my mind is the idea of magic. And so a lot of people who grew up religious or not religious, but in particular in the Christian religion, are usually taught that, magic is bad. Magic is wrong. It's not good for you. Now, when I was growing up, I kind of had a hard time deciphering between, what makes something considered to be magic versus, a miracle. And I'm not trying to be like funny about it or like make fun of any of it. Like, I take that kind of stuff really seriously, but it's like, okay, for example, in Christianity, you're taught about prayer. And I'm not saying that all the stuff is biblical, but I'm just saying, just like standard, typical Christian teaching, what do they teach? If you were raised in the church, usually there's like these standard teachings that you'll find that you learn. And so when it comes to ideas surrounding learning about like magic or miracles or prayer. Well, actually, they say this with prayer. When you pray, there can be 3 possible answers, which is yes, no, or later, like a later date, And the person praying, the human praying, does not know what that answer will be. But that's the Christian explanation in the mainstream churches of how you get your answer. They say God always answers your prayers, but sometimes the answer is going to be no. So you don't really get exactly, what you wanted, because the answer was no. But no is still an answer. Like, if you think about it, if you ask your parent for something, if you're like a kid and you're at a store, at a candy store, and you're like, I really want these malt balls or something like that. I really want these malt balls. Mom, dad, or whoever, can you get me these malt balls? They can say yes, they can say no, they can say next time. But if they say nothing, if they just don't respond, either they give a complete different response or they just altogether don't even like answer you. You wouldn't call that an answer, right? If they don't answer you, it's like, that's not even an answer, you know what I mean? But if they do answer you yes, no, or later, then that is an answer. It might not be the answer you want. The kid wants their parent to say yes. Usually when you request something, you very likely want that thing. I don't know. There's always like these weird cases where it's like, oh, like there's all this psychological, like maybe you meant this and maybe you meant that. But overall, when people request something, they request it because they want it. it's not going to be common that, people are requesting things that they do not desire. And so people say that about prayer, right? And so with a miracle, sometimes miracles can be based on, a prayer. You're like, I really need this thing to come through, and I know there's maybe nothing in my direct power that I could foresee happening. Like, say for example, nowadays people need money, right? And holidays are coming up. Some people culturally are pressured towards buying gifts. People need money, people want money, people need to be able to afford their food. It's serious time right now. Like, people need cash. It's not even like a joking matter for a lot of people. It's like they need the money. There's nothing that that they need more. And so sometimes people might be like, man, like, I'm gonna apply. Like, I just did an Uber Eats delivery for Arby's, right? I guess in some places, I think in some places it's called something else, but they have the thin sliced, like, kind of like lunch meat style sandwiches, but it's like hot sandwiches. I don't know how else to describe it, but they have like roast beef and stuff like that, like turkey or whatever, and it's like thin sliced. And it's a very basic type of food, but I just did a delivery to Arby's, right? So say for example, I went there, I saw that they had a sign up that's like hiring immediately, right? So say if I'm desperate for money and I'm like, oh, I should apply to this Arby's, and I go and I'm like, let me just do this application. Like, let me put in this application and hope that I get the job, So I put in the application when I get home today, and I pray, and I'm like, praying, please let me get this job by tomorrow. And then I find out that every Friday, I'm making this up, I find out that every Friday is payday. And so, I call the place tomorrow. I'm ambitious, I'm proactive, and they're like, oh yeah, we saw your application. We're in need of staff. Like, can you start today? And so I'm like, yeah, like today's Monday, tomorrow's Tuesday. I drive in Tuesday, start working immediately. By Friday, I've got a paycheck, right? Now, I could attribute that to the prayer. I could be like, that was a miracle. I prayed that I would get this job. Now, usually something would be classified towards a miracle if it doesn't seem likely that it was going to happen without the prayer, right? Now, you can't say for sure that you weren't going to get the job or you were going to get the job before the prayer or before the application or whatever. It might have been that regardless of the prayer, you might get the job. That's possible, maybe, right? But say you're like, man, I need this money by like Friday or else I'm going to get evicted or something. And they just, I don't know how much. I don't think Arby's pays that much, but it's like, say they give you like, they're like, man, so many staff aren't coming in and like we're short staffed. So every shift, because you're just onboarding, every shift is going to be cash payment. You get to keep the cash, and it's going to be time and a half or double pay or something. I don't know. Let's call it something ridiculous where you're like, with between Tuesday morning to Friday night, you made, $3,000 or something ridiculous like that. Like for a lot of people, that's like a month's worth of work. And so, or even like a half month's of work, but it could be about a month's worth of work for a lot of people. And so say you make that much money, and you're like, man, like, and you go to your church service, you're going to be like, that was miraculous. Like, that was something out of the norm, right? Most people, when they apply for a job, they don't start the next day. Now, these times are different because I have heard and known about different scenarios where people get hired on the spot at some places like, desperate places like Panda Express and McDonald's and places that are desperately hiring right now. Like, there was a point where they were even putting little like pieces of paper in your meal at McDonald's saying like, hey, if you need a job, here's a QR code. They put it on the bag. They put it like on a sign outside, just like, please apply, like inquire within, like come in now, and like just like put in an application. Like, they were making it as easy as possible because they were desperate. Now, in my life, I don't think I've ever seen McDonald's desperate for staff. Like, this is something that I'm like, this is a new thing. Like, I've never seen that, you know. A lot of these places are desperate and they were hiring like on the spot. So now it's not, because of the times that we're in, it might not be too far out of reach to get a job right away and to start right away. And depending on like the manager's ability, you know, to provide you with a lot of perks or whatever, you may actually be able to get paychecks right away. Like, I don't really know. Like, usually there's an onboarding period and, you know, the live scan and all this kind of like, you know, so that you can start later, you know. But it's, you know, we're living in different times, you know. And so, I mean, I'm not here to say, oh, if that happened to somebody, it's not a miracle. It's just coincidence because it's the times. But it's also really rare. Like, that's not something that you would see, right? Like somebody getting paid in cash, double pay or time and a half, and getting like $3,000 within like 4 days, you know, like, or within 4 shifts, you know, like, you don't really see that. That's not normal. That's not normal. And say if it's just the amount of money that the person needs to, you know, pull through with whatever it is that they had to pay for that was so desperate. I mean, a lot of people will call that a miracle. I would probably call that a miracle. And if it happened to me or someone that I was like worried about with their situation, and I'm like, man, I hope they get help, but I can't even help them, and like that was how it came through, I would be like, I'd tell that story to a bunch of people. I'd be like, yeah, that's probably a miracle. That was awesome. Like, they experienced some awesome, powerful movement there, that isn't normal. That's not normal, right? But, you know, what's the difference? Or, you know, you can have miracles without praying. You know, you can. I mean, I've seen things happen before. Like, I remember being on a mission trip before, and we were in the middle of zero nowhere. Like, we were back in some dirt roads, like the places in Mexico where you have to drive around the potholes off of the paved, in quotes, I call it paved streets, because you're like dodging potholes the whole time. They desperately needed repaving, and, you know, but it had some form of pavement or gravel or something on there that we were driving on. And then we drove off of that into some dirt somewhere, and we weren't even driving like on like paved roads, and we were like probably 30-40 minutes, an hour into the, I don't know, I wasn't driving, I was like a kid back in like 8th grade or something, but like we were driving back in some and we were like in the cut somewhere. Like, I don't even know where we were. There was sand everywhere. I think the place was called Mezcatal. I can't recall. I went to quite a few places in Mexico over years, and I unfortunately don't recall. But I feel like Mezcatal was the first place I went, and it was like this little, I don't know if it was beach, but it was sand. It was like sand, and it was like in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know if I was with the youth pastor when this happened, but he had to drive somewhere else that was away from where we were. And he drove there, he got there, and lo and behold, the keys get locked in the car. Now, you know, this is back before like smartphones. Like, they used to have those walkie-talkies, like the adult team used to have these like walkie-talkies that they would carry, like that people used to use for like camping and like, you know, just all kinds of like outdoor stuff. Like, but they'd have these walkie-talkies and stuff. So they had some form of communication, but it's like, you know, as far as charging them and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And like, you know, you're in the middle of nowhere. This isn't like nowadays where like, oh, maybe you can walk to somewhere where your GPS works or where your phone works, or you can like, I don't know, call for some kind of support. Like, there were like, people didn't really have cell phones like that back then. And you know, it was like nothing was convenient. So the chance of this youth pastor actually getting the keys in a timely fashion was not going to help. And I think as I remember, it was either somebody who was with him from our group, or somebody who was just random, like some random person maybe that they were meeting with, or that was like from the area, or maybe there was a house nearby. I don't really know. Like, there was some random person with some random set of keys that was not the keys for this rental van. It wasn't even like they owned the car. It was a rental van. where the keys were locked in the car, and everyone had been, you're waiting, you're trying to like wait around. Everyone had been like checking all the doors, trying to like pull on the doors and like see, okay, well the doors lock. And to our knowledge, none of these doors had ever like jammed or anything. And the person, is like, well, we can just try my keys, like it's like you're not gonna think that's gonna work, dude. It worked. Key some random person puts in a key to some other car, and it just opens the door like like nothing. And I think they said that they tried it again, like after they got the keys out, they tried it again, and it didn't work again. Like they couldn't use the key again on the same door or any other door. It didn't work again. And so it's stories like that where you're like, okay, like I don't know if they prayed or if they didn't pray, but I don't recall specifically them praying about it. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Like I really don't know. But you can have scenarios like that where it's like, say if someone didn't pray, but then something happens where you're like, whoa. And you even have an opportunity to test it out, and it doesn't work the same. If you were doing like a research project, you would be like, yeah, this is like, like that's not something that you can repeat. Like when you do research, it's like, is it something you can repeat? If I give somebody this pill and it heals them and of whatever it is, and then I give 20 people the same pill and it heals all 20 of them, and then I give 50 people the same pill and it heals all of them, and I give another 100 people the same pill and it only heals like 99 of them, and one person only doesn't get healed, you would be like, okay, that's a good rate. This heals. You could say, this, whatever this thing is healing people, in that weird example I just made up. So, okay, you take things like miracles, you take things like prayers, and then you take things like magic, right? And the church usually teaches that magic is related to demons, and it's evil, and it's bad, and it's wrong. Anytime, I don't know why it's considered wrong, but I think it's because you're not calling on God or Jesus. You're either relying on your own power or some other entity or ancestry, or your ancestors, or you're calling on something that's not God. And I think that's the problem that the church has with it. No one's ever explained to me why they have so many issues with it. But the reason why I bring it up is because I was listening to this episode of Joe Rogan's podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience, and David Blaine was the one who was being interviewed on there. And he's a magician that a lot of people say like, oh, there's something wrong with him. And he mentioned this book. I think he said it was called Swami's and Mantras, or Swami's Mantras, or something like that, about things that he was trying to learn, because he saw somebody once swallow a piece of thread and then pull it out of their stomach. And he does this trick of his where he puts the thread, I think, through the lower part of his chin and pulls it out. And it's, it's one of those things that, a lot of people are like, oh, it's like it tricks your eye or whatever. But he has tricks that are like beyond like normal kinds of tricks, like being submerged in icy waters or underground in water or in ice for longer than is normal for anybody, and still being able to survive it. I mean, he talks about having hallucinations during those times. Like he's definitely like testing his mind, his endurance with things that many people can die from this stuff. But it seems like he has methods of trying to like train to do it. Like it's not like he just like is able to just do it all of a sudden. And it kind of, I think I've talked about this on here before, but I think it was Sadhguru who was talking to Joe Rogan. Ooh, am I wrong? I don't know. Like, I think it was, if I find these links, I will link them in this episode. But I think it was Sadhguru who was talking to Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan was trying to pick his brain, and he's like, tell me about some of the stuff that you do that's like the power, they call, I guess they were saying like the power of meditation, or the power of like what Sadhguru's, I don't know, I guess there's some, I don't want to call it powers, but there's some kind of thing that he teaches that people can learn how to do that's like a form of supernatural. So the one example he gave is like a lady or somebody like laying down face up, and the person is able to lay down face up, and they put a saucer of water on the person's forehead, and the water begins to boil. Now that is not something that normally you can just do. And I think it's like the person's body temperature or mindset or something has a role in like changing the temperature of the water in this saucer. And they say like it's not safe to do it for too long because it could cause permanent damage to the person and all this kind of stuff. But they're doing something where it's like they're channeling something or doing something that other than like applying fire or heat that makes this water boil. And you know, they're not putting like any kind of like chemical components in it or any kind of natural components in it that together would lead to like heat. Kind of like, okay, like I would say you don't always need fire for heat, right? Like, so say, have you ever gone skiing or snowboarding or somewhere in the snow, and they have these like, you know, you might get these little heat packs for your hands or your gloves or to put in your socks at night so that they keep you warm, right? And all you do to activate it is like, you know, open the package and maybe like shake it a little bit. Or you've seen those like ice packs that they have in, well, this is like the opposite, I guess, but you've seen those ice packs they have in like those first aid kits where somebody just like snaps the little bubble in the middle of it, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, getting colder and colder and colder, and you can see the condensation on it and you can feel it, and you're like, this is icy cold right now. Like those heat things though, those little heat temperature things, you know, like they don't get to the point where they're burning, but I'm just making the point that like, you know, you didn't light a fire to make it burn. Like, so there are ways to make things hot or something, you know, where, you know, there's no actual fire or spark to heat it. So that is possible, but it's like what he was doing wasn't even that. It was like some other thing. So I would put that in the realm of magic of some sort, maybe, because it doesn't seem like. I mean, I guess the difference is when you need a miracle, when you want a miracle, it's for some specific benefit, right? Like if you're just kind of playing around with stuff like David Blaine, like in a chunk of ice or like being buried underground in like a thing of water, or like, you know, submerged in like a tank and holding his breath, or, you know, swallowing these frogs and like all that kind of stuff. You know, or even that Sadhguru thing, how he was saying how he had that they could have someone like heat up a saucer with their forehead. That's how strong it is, the stuff that they practice. It's different when you're like practicing, like testing your mind and body's limits, versus like, I need this for my own comfort or well-being, you know, or I'm in a desperate situation and I need this to kind of work out. So I guess that's kind of the difference I would see. Like, I don't really see people like David Blaine or Sadhguru and those kind of people being like, oh yeah, like, you need more money? I got this magic trick that's gonna heal the United States economic, you know, situation. So let me do this over here and perform this magic over here, and now the economy is fixed. You know, like, it's not. They're not doing stuff like that. They're doing kind of like tricks, you know, or like some kind of like, you know, I struggle with the words to try to explain what it is. But there's some kind of tricks or some kind of like tests. It's not so much like praying for a miracle. So, and I think in one of the episodes I recorded near Halloween or on Halloween, I did talk a little bit about some kind of explanations maybe that I got towards like my own, you know, interest in Halloween, or that kind of thing, like, or like trying to, see if there's any kind of sign of, a response from God or something like that. I don't know, but now is this stuff related to demons? The David Blaine stuff, the Sadhguru stuff, the types of tricks and skills that you see these people exhibit. Is it um is it demons? And there's also this guy on YouTube. I've maybe I've debated if I wanted to talk about him, because I don't really want people to feel like I'm trying to like sway them one way or another. But I do like to talk about all sides. And when I I will say honestly, when I started indulging in some of his content, I found it to be a bit confusing, because I learned things from him. So David Tovia, I think his name is Tovia, Tovia. I think his first name is David. I haven't watched his content in a while, but from what I remember, if I'm right, he talks about Jesus and the real Jewish, explanation for things that Jesus may have done or said, and then he does go into some talk about the miracles of Jesus, because he doesn't think the miracles are real, and talking about how he thinks that those miracles are fake and tricks and schemes, that nobody does miracles and things like that. And so he thinks it wasn't of God. And then there is also this story in the Bible of Moses, right? Doing things that I wouldn't consider, I mean, I don't know. It almost seems like it's similar to the Sadhguru and David Blaine stuff. So when Moses is trying to convince Pharaoh, right, let my people go, and the plagues that God gives, and then even when the early times, like before the plagues, when Moses was talking to the spiritual leaders, the magicians that were Egyptian, and he was like doing things, and the magicians were able to kind of do the same thing. They were able to do a version of the same thing or the same thing. Now, things like Moses turning the staff into a snake. Was it Moses or Aaron? But turning the staff into a snake, or turning, like the different types of things, of turning something into something else, like the water to blood, and then like all these other things. Like, where is that considered? I mean, I don't know. I guess it just depends, because sometimes you would label something as like a miracle or like a sign from God, but where do you draw the line? Because it's like, okay, that's not the same kind of miracle as I need my keys out of the car, or I need money for my family or whatever. Like, that's not the same kind of like, oh, like I need this for my benefit. It's like, yeah, ultimately for the benefit of the slaves to be freed. I mean, if you want to put it that way, for Pharaoh to free the slaves, maybe. I mean, I could put a big maybe on that, but I mean, like, it's not like an immediate thing. Like, there was like this whole process, there's like this whole entire process, and just some of it to me seemed a little magical, in my opinion. And there's other stuff in the Bible that I feel like, Jews, Christians, people will say, oh, this is a miracle, it was a miracle. But it's like, was it a miracle or was it magic? And I grew up with people complaining about Harry Potter in the church, or people complaining that some of us played Magic the Gathering, and people complaining about all kinds of things. Like, it was a really strict religion, and so there were so many things. Even playing like poker and playing cards was kind of taboo, even if you weren't really gambling. Even just playing for chips, was considered like taboo, and so, or even playing video games, if they have violence, or video games in general were considered pretty taboo, or watching MTV, stuff like that. So it's like, when it comes to like the magic stuff, they weren't really like playing with it at all. But there was a lot of praying, and there was a lot of, belief in miracles and belief in stay away from this other stuff because it's bad, it's demons, it's the devil, it's not good for you. But it does seem like these people who practice, like Sadhguru and David Blaine, it does seem like they have to build up. It's not like they wake up and they're like, I can flash lightning bolts out of my fingertips or whatever. Like they're not doing something like that. Like they're building up, it seems like, some kind of skill to be able to like get to the point where, if it's like meditative powers or whatever it is, I don't know what the skills are that they're building, because these people don't talk about it. But in that episode with Joe Rogan, what kind of got my gears in my mind turning the most was he actually kind of talks a little bit about methods that people use to kind of do these types of things that people consider magic. And so that was pretty cool. And I do like stuff about like the power of the mind, things like hallucinations. I mean, I'm not saying like I like that people suffer from them, but it's like some people can induce them. Like they'll take certain things, like, some people have different experience with psychedelics, different experiences with all kind of things. And, psychonauts, whatever you call them, like people have, they find value in that. I'm one of those people. I find value in seeing what the mind can kind of do when there's some other altered state, either if I'm altering the state myself or if I'm taking something to alter it. I mean, it's just tricky though, because they don't teach you this stuff in school, and you can study it, but a lot of it is like experiments for your own individual self. But what do you guys think? Do you think that this stuff is all the same thing? It's just put a different label on it because of the background that you're coming at it from? Or do you think that, really that when it's not related to God and Jesus of the Bible, that it's evil? Or do you think that, Jesus was performing actual miracles, or was it some form of magic? Or was it lies? What do you guys think? Because I think it's a very interesting topic, because it almost seems like anyone can learn how to do this stuff. And I've heard people say, about the power of, and the Bible talks about it too, about the power of, faith. Like if you have faith with your prayer, your prayer is going to be stronger. There's going to be more, you're going to get more benefit from the prayer if you're strong, in your faith. You know, and we're taught a lot of that kind of stuff. But I mean, I get curious more so about the practice behind it. Not that I'm gonna like practice like witchcraft or anything, but how do you know if you're practicing witchcraft or not? I mean, I'm not trying to be like sound like an idiot, but it's like, when I think about this stuff, sometimes I'm like, okay, I like to know, am I learning, or did I learn something from a prejudiced point of view where people were like, okay, of course, the church always teaches you to be like against demon possession, against demons, against Satan. Obviously they're going to teach you not to like worship Satan and stuff, because that's like the enemy of the Bible. Like you're not supposed to worship Satan, or any other gods and all this other kind of stuff. But it's like, is magic even worshiping? Because you're not really calling on anybody. Like it sounds to me like with magic, if it's not like a natural gift that you're using magically, that you're kind of building the skills. I mean, I'm gonna have to check out some of these books and things. I think the name, did I get it wrong? Is his name Tovia Singer? I'm gonna have to look up rabbi's name that I think I'm butchering the name, sorry. Let me look it up for you. Alright, let me look it up. Let me see if his name is Tovia Singer, not David Tovia. Let me see. Sorry, guys. My memory is really weird lately. So let's see. Tovia Singer. I don't know why that name just came to my mind. Yeah, Tovia Singer. Sorry, it's not David Tovia. It's Tovia Singer, an American Orthodox rabbi and the founder and director of Outreach Judaism. So he talks to Jews that got what they call tricked, into becoming Christians. And I don't know. I'm not saying that everything I learned, about Christianity was right or wrong or whatever. Like, I'm not against Christianity, I'm not against Judaism, I'm not against Hinduism, I'm not against all these other kind of religions. I want to know, I want to know, like, was somebody tricking us to believe it for control reasons? Were they just teaching all these things that we all just like regurgitate and just spout around? I think it's worth challenging. I think it's worth challenging, a lot of these topics, which is why I bring them up, because they're questions that I have that I'm just like, well, was somebody just saying this because they don't want other people to learn? Like, because if you could technically learn how to do magical things, I mean, and then there's like a priest or a pastor or something, it's like, how are you going to compete with a congregation who can do miracles and magic? If everybody's like, well, I can make water boil, well, I can pull things, I can pull a thread through my chin or through my stomach, I can, do this thing, this like ultra kind of thing that other classic humans can't do because they never practiced it or never built up the endurance to do it or whatever. I mean, I don't know if that's the best use of your time, is like figuring out how long you can stay in a block of ice or whatever, or how many frogs you can eat. Like, I don't really think it is like, I mean, I don't know. I get it. David Blaine gets paid for this, so it's like, it's different. But it's like, I think people could probably use their time for better things, like, it's kind of like, people do it to like maybe pump themselves up, to like show others, like, look at all this cool stuff that I can do. Look at me, you know, because some of it's like worthless. Like, where am I going to use? How's it going to benefit anybody if I can eat a bunch of frogs? How's it going to benefit anybody if I can show somebody that I could pull some kind of thread through my lip or chin or whatever? Like, who, at the end of the day, it's like, who am I helping? Like, maybe you're bringing a smile and some awe and some motivation to people, and you're making them think about things in life, but it's like, you know what are you really doing? Like, are you really doing anything of significance with that? Versus if you could like heal people, or if you could like, you know um you know actually help major systems, or you could actually like give people some kind of like emotional comfort, and you actually had some kind of skill where it's like, whenever you're around somebody, you could like implement that skill and like do something like that helps people's lives change. Like, that's a little bit different. Like, maybe I'm just judging it as more valuable, but I feel like that's more valuable than eating frogs and all that. But still, I mean, there's people who can freaking eat frogs and stuff. So it's like, like, eat them whole. Not like, I don't know. I don't even want to talk about it. It's disgusting. But yeah, it's weird stuff. It's weird stuff, to say the least. I don't know where I stand with it. Just more questions than answers. I don't mind. I'm comfortable with the questions. Um, but I do think it's a little weird, because there, it seems to be a very fine line. And I know, like, religion, classic Christian religion teaches you, not to really dabble in that kind of stuff. And there are people who have said that they did dabble in it, or they got out of Christianity and started dabbling in it, and then their life turned south and like everything started going bad for them, or they got like some kind of hauntings and some kind of possessions and like, so I'm not saying that it's not risky. I'm not saying, hey, everybody go and like learn magic and like start practicing and, do all these fantastical things and you'll be fine and safe. Like, I don't know, you might end up in a really bad place. Like, I don't really know. I don't really know. It seems to be some tricky stuff. Um, but it's just something that I'm curious about. I don't know. My curiosity sometimes doesn't doesn't really help. Um, but you know, I don't know. I'm not saying to practice this stuff. I'm just asking the question: are we labeling it correctly? Is it really bad? Is it, how can you determine if the ones that come through God or Jesus are better than the ones that come through Sadhguru or David Blaine? I'm not saying worship those guys or whatever. I'm just saying, like, how do you know? Uh, I guess one way to know is if your life starts going downhill and you start doing one or the other, like that's one way to know. But I mean, I don't know that many people who say that, they became, a believer in God and all of a sudden, well, yeah, unless there's like a prejudice environment or like they're being persecuted. Other than those types of scenarios, I've never really heard somebody say, I became a believer in God and my life just got significantly worse over and over again. Maybe Job, but usually you don't hear a bunch of stories like that. Usually people talk about how much better everything gets. And whereas the other stuff, I do notice when people start like dabbling, then they're like, "Oh, my life got so much worse." Like, not I wouldn't say everybody, but I do think that it's just interesting because a lot of people say like, "Oh, they don't say it's about me," but a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm atheist," or "I don't believe in God," and all this kind of stuff. But I feel like when you go the route of the practice, that's where things start getting more interesting. Is when you're actually practicing something, not just going into a building and like listening to some dude, like a woman or whoever it is, talk about what it is that the scripture taught them or what it is, life examples that they have to give, and let's read some passages from the Bible or read a devotional every morning. I think with religion, the interesting parts come when you're practicing it. When you practice a religion, when you practice a belief system, that's when you start seeing different results, I think. Um, Not so much in just the passive, like, the religion says don't do this, so I'll just avoid all this stuff. Like, do you learn? Like, do you actually, like, have some kind of, like, communion with a higher being and, like, interact with it in any way on a regular basis? And if you do, or when you do you notice anything different? Like, is your mood different? Is your life different? Are you just seeing things in a different light? Like, do you have some form of like worship that you perform or something? I mean, even if it's not the biblical God, I'm just curious to know because most people practice a religion, I think, because they get something out of it, right? Like, if every time I read the Bible, or every time I prayed, or every time I went to church, or every time I went to a meditation session, or every time I did a yoga practice, or every time I went to temple and like prayed or went to an altar or something, and did whatever kind of ceremony, and my life got significantly worse every single time, you can bet I would stop practicing that immediately. I would not be like, oh, yes, this is the religion for me. Let me stay here. Like the car breaks down every time I do this thing, and then I almost got in an accident, and I lose my job, and then somebody breaks up with me. And it's like all like after I start practicing something, but then I notice when I don't practice anything, my life is good. It's like that's probably not a good religion, if your religion is doing that to you. Um, and I do definitely have the issues with organized religion as far as the manipulation involved with it, the brainwashing and all that. But I think there's a point where you can learn kind of just how to treat people good, how to treat yourself good, and you know how to kind of get some kind of like natural thing that you have an ability to do or learn how to do better, and you learn it and you do it and you help people in the world. And I feel like that's the best starting place, is at least trying to help society as well as your own self and your family and or the people you live with and your friends and stuff. um Even if you're not like doing it for some other kind of like, oh, I need to go to heaven instead of hell or something. And then I think going from there, trying to see like, is this coming from somewhere other than yourself? And if it is, like, is it something that you can connect with, and learn about and improve on and get kind of to a point where you can kind of like almost test it, where it's like kind of like how I said that pill example. If every time you give somebody this pill, if it heals somebody, you know, then it's probably a good medicine. And then if it heals like almost every single person, like 99.9999% of people have positive reactions from it, um, then that's good. That's good. But it's like, can you get your life like that? Do you have like a practice or something that you can do for society that you've learned how to do? You've developed the skills, not magic tricks, but something similar where you're like, it's coming from something that's not just your normal human self. You've developed this over time, uh, from somewhere, and it actually helps people. I think if people have something like that, that's definitely valuable. But all the other weird, like eating frogs and stuff, is kind of like, I can't really justify that as it's entertaining, but it's like, what are we really doing here? Um, but yeah, I would say if people find something that goes that route, um, um, then it seems like it's in the right direction. But at the end of the day, like, what do I know, right? But I don't know. Interesting topic. Hope you liked it.